Imagine waking up tomorrow and no one is there. Not gone, not dead, just asleep. Every human being on Earth at precisely the same moment closes their eyes. And for 100 years, the world breathes without us. What happens to the cities we built, to the borders we drew, to the stories we told ourselves about who we are and why we matter? And more unsettling than any of that, what happens to the idea of us? We have always assumed that the world exists because we are watching it, that civilization is the natural state of things, that roads belong on the earth the way rivers do, that our laws and languages and grocery stores are somehow permanent features of reality, rather than agreements, fragile, temporary agreements held together only by the fact that enough of us wake up each morning and choose to believe in them. But belief requires a believer. And if every believer fell asleep at once, the world would not pause. It would not wait politely. It would not hold its breath until we returned. It would simply continue, quietly, indifferently, like it always has, like it was doing long before the first human ever opened their eyes and decided that any of this meant something. This is not a story about the apocalypse. Apocalypses are dramatic. They require an audience. This is a story about what exists when there is no audience at all. In the first few days, the silence would be deafening, but only if someone were there to hear it. Power grids, designed to be managed, would flicker and fail within 72 hours. Not with a bang, not with fire. Just a quiet, unwitnessed dimming, city by city, continent by continent, like candles being blown out in an empty room. The satellites we launched into orbit those small, careful machines we sent into the sky to help us find ourselves on the map would drift. Slowly at first. Then, over months, they would tumble into new paths or fall back to Earth, burning up in the atmosphere with no one below to look up and notice the streak of light. And the internet, that vast, invisible web we built to make sure no human ever truly felt alone, would go dark. Not all at once. The servers would run as long as the power holds. For a while, it would just be a place where old conversations sit unanswered, messages waiting for replies that will never come. A monument to connection, humming quietly in the dark. This is already happening, in a small way. Right now, there are servers storing emails sent to people who have died. Messages with no recipients. Someone somewhere typed the words, "I love you, call me when you can," and no one ever will. The internet holds those words in perfect, patient suspension. It does not mourn them, it simply holds them. Now imagine that on a planetary scale. By the end of the first year, nature would begin its quiet reclamation. Chernobyl showed us this. When humans left forcibly, terrified, the forests came back, the wolves came back, birds nested in the cooling towers, lynxes wandered through the reactor buildings, unbothered, as if the concrete were just another kind of rock formation. Life, it turned out, was not waiting for our permission. It was simply waiting for our absence. In our sleeping world, the same would begin everywhere. Vines would find the cracks in skyscrapers because vines always find the cracks. Roots would pry apart the asphalt of the highways we were so proud of. Rivers, no longer dredged and redirected, would begin finding their old paths again, the paths they had before we decided water should go where we told it to. The Amazon would exhale, the coral reefs, relieved of warming and chemical runoff, would begin, slowly, painfully slowly, to regenerate. The world would not become paradise. It would become wild, indifferent, complicated, exactly what it was before we arrived and decided to call it ours. Here is the haunting part. The planet would not notice us missing. There would be no gap in the ecosystem shaped exactly like a human being, no empty space labeled "people used to stand here." Nature does not keep a place for us at the table. It never did. It simply tolerated our presence the way a river tolerates a stone. It works around us. And the moment we are gone, the water finds a new path. No grief, no ceremony, just flow. By decade 2, the cities would be unrecognizable, not destroyed, not in ruins, not yet, but visibly, undeniably claimed by something older than steel and glass. Paris would have forests growing through it. Not metaphorically, Literally the trees of the Bois de Boulogne, no longer trimmed and contained, spreading block by block, decade by decade, into the avenues we named after wars and victories. The Eiffel Tower, beautiful and exact, would stand. Iron corrodes slowly. But no one would be there to find it beautiful, which raises a question so strange it almost hurts. Is something beautiful if nothing conscious is there to experience it? The Louvre would still hold the Mona Lisa, sealed behind glass, preserved in climate-controlled dark until the climate control fails. And then the slow, patient work of humidity and time would begin. Not violently, not angrily, just the way all things that are not tended eventually return to the matter they came from. The greatest art in human history dissolving quietly in the dark, and no one would be there to call it a tragedy, because tragedy is a story, and stories need someone to tell them. By decade 5, language would begin to die. Not in a dramatic way. There would be no last speaker, no final word uttered before silence. Language would die the way it always dies, not in the absence of mouths, but in the absence of need. No one would need to name things. The tree would grow without being called a tree. The river would run without being called a river. The silence would exist without the word silence to carve it out from everything else. This is perhaps the most profound loss in this whole thought experiment. Not the cities, not the art, not the satellites, but the names, the stories, the entire architecture of meaning that we spent 100,000 years building, word by careful word, so that one consciousness could reach across the gap and touch another. All of it, voiceless. Here is what that reveals. Language is not a discovery. It is not something we found, like fire or gravity. It is something we made, something we agreed to. A shared hallucination so persistent and so beautiful that we forgot it was ours to begin with. Without us, the universe does not have a name for itself. It just is. Enormous, silent, neither beautiful nor terrible, just real. And then, after 100 years, imagine we wake up. We open our eyes. We don't remember sleeping. It felt like nothing, like it always does. One moment it was the world we knew. And now it is this. Vines on the skyscrapers, rivers in the roads, forests where the cities used to be, the internet dark, the satellites gone, every agreed upon border dissolved back into geography. What would we do? Would we grieve? Would we try to rebuild exactly what was lost? The highways, the servers, the carefully maintained borders? Or would we stop, just for a moment, and ask ourselves the question we never quite got around to asking before we fell asleep? Was all of that necessary? Or was it just comfortable? Because what the 100 years would prove, what the forests and the rivers and the silence would prove, is that the world we called civilization was not a destination. It was a negotiation, an ongoing, exhausting, extraordinary negotiation between 7 billion minds, each one agreeing to act as if the same things were real. The money, the nations, the status, the urgency of all those unanswered messages. None of it survived our sleep, because none of it existed outside of us. There is a kind of loneliness in that realization, and a kind of freedom. We are not the audience the universe performs for. We are not the reason the stars burn or the oceans move. We are something far stranger, a species that became conscious of a universe that was never conscious of us, and decided, quietly and collectively, to build meaning anyway. To name things, to love things, to record things carefully so that others who came after might understand what it felt like to be alive in this particular moment, on this particular rock, circling this particular star. The universe does not need our stories. But we do. We need them the way we need oxygen invisibly, constantly, without realizing how much we depend on them until the moment they're gone. So perhaps the real question is not what the world looks like when we're asleep. Perhaps the real question is what we are doing with the time we are awake. Because 100 years from now, with or without any great collective slumber, most of what we are anxious about today will be vines and silence. Most of what we are building will be returned piece by piece to the earth. And the only things that will have mattered truly, lastingly mattered, are the moments when one conscious mind reached across the darkness towards another and said, I see you, I'm here, we are not alone. That is the whole of civilization. That is the whole of us, not the buildings, not the borders, just that.